Hey guys, in this video, wanted to show you kind of the top things to look for when you're looking at buying a house out here in Colorado, or climate similar to Colorado, honestly. Um, because a lot of times, either people coming out of state or people who are not super aware of some of the things that will come up. Um, and they miss things. Even sometimes inspectors will miss things, but um, this is not a scenario. This video is not meant to be in lieu of an inspection. The inspection is super important. It's The inspectors, if they're licensed, they're generally very, very good at their job, and they'll find all of the important things that need to be caught before you are stuck with a house. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, the biggest thing I see, and this is coming from almost a decade in construction, remodels, repairs, all those types of things. So, um, I get I was getting dozens and dozens of calls a year due to this one single issue, and this was these trim boards for the windows would be rotten. Um, a lot of times, if it wasn't kept up, the paint wasn't kept up, then moisture would get behind it or into it, or down inside underneath the window and then in, and it would rot the window. And this is super common in Colorado. It happens to the best of people. Sometimes you just can't really avoid it. Who wants to go up 30 feet on a ladder and go caulk a window, every year? The Colorado is really hard on everything, living and houses, any material really, because we have such drastic changes in temperature. In the morning it'll be freezing, and by the afternoon it'll be 60 degrees. I've seen it where it's been raining, then snowing, then hailing, then beautiful, all in one day. That's just the joys of living in Colorado and the variety that we get here. So, not to mention all the different seasons we get to experience here as well. Um, so if these aren't caulked, these seams here, they're not caulked and maintained, you're gonna see issues. You're gonna have issues on your house. Same thing here. Like this right here will need to be filled. This is a big entrance for any moisture come in and intrude. Pretty much any intrusion is what you want to avoid. So that's one thing. Under here, under the siding, you'll see that it's concrete here, and then you've got wood siding, and this is paneling, so it's a little bit different. Usually it's like a lap siding, but it's the same concept. The first one under here, it should be painted. If it's not painted, it will more likely than not start to rot on you, or bubble paint or peel paint. And paint's hard enough these days to keep on wood out here in Colorado, just because, again, it's a harsh environment, extreme temperatures, and all that. So nowadays, a lot of homes have hardy siding, which is essentially a cement board in a lap, or they do have panels as well in a cement board, and that tends to hold paint a lot better. It's a lot harder to work with because it cracks. There's no give, so you'll see a lot of times if there was siding all the way around this window, and you had this hardy trim or whatever. A lot of times you can see when the house settles, you'll see a crack from the corners as things shift. That's the other great thing about Colorado, is there is a lot of shifting that goes on in Colorado. The soil is not great. There's a lot of places that have better soil and it doesn't shift as much, but there's pros and cons to everything. And so that's one of the other things I wanted to show you guys. So the next spot is this board here is just a regular like Doug fir board. and generally they usually contact the ground or get really close, and then you have some sealing that's around the bottom. So you can see down here, you got some caulk or silicone, and then against that board, and then there's a little bit of a gap. It kind of sits on the garage floor, but kind of lifts off in other places. So that's another area to keep your eyes out, and make sure you maintain it or check it out as you're looking at houses. Other spots here, the outlet covers. Sometimes they can be broken off, or they're not sealed through all the way. And if you get moisture behind there into the wiring, obviously it's not great. So okay, so another spot. You'll see that when two trim boards meet up together, marry up together, sometimes there's gaps. Nothing's perfect, and so you'll have, a big gap, little gap, whatever. So as long as those are sealed with caulk or like a paintable silicone, that's a good thing to look at. Now, none of this stuff is really like a deal breaker. If it's up to you as the buyer, and it's up to you as a homeowner to maintain that. So, I wouldn't say don't buy a house just because it has a few rotten boards on it. Put it in an objection, listen to your agent, take note in the inspection paperwork, and then kind of go from there. So, but yeah, it's not super hard to replace any of this stuff, but it is something to be aware of, because when you're going through a house, you don't want to be into the deal and then have all these issues come up in inspection when you could have already known about them and could have just easily glanced at it on a showing or a walkthrough, and then you've been like, yeah, this is just too much, or yeah, we're gonna have to make sure that we add all these items in and lump them together in an objection or something like that. So sliding glass door. These are big. This is big. There should be a flashing piece here above all the windows, all the doors, and then sometimes additionally, this is different because it's a panel, so that this trim is actually on top of the panel. But a lot of times you'll have, if it was like a lap siding, you'd have flashing here and flashing on top of the trim. If they double flash, they knew what they were doing and they did a good job. Also, if the windows, you won't know this, but hopefully if they did a good job, they will have taped the windows and the doors around, all the way around, so that it's an air barrier as well as a water barrier, and it's basically just a sticky tape that kind of goes over the window flange fin, and that allows you to get a little more seal and weatherproofing in that area. Another thing I see a lot of times is you'll see gutters. So the gutters will actually just go straight down, and they'll be disconnected from the French drain or whatever drainage pipe they have. And so that's something to take note of and make sure that you're catching those things and taking note of them, because that can be a big issue. And if it's a lot of moisture or a negative grade against the house, which means the dirt's coming towards the house, and it's higher here than it is against the house, that can lead to bigger problems, way bigger problems. Too much moisture in a foundation can lead to cracking, obviously flooding, messed up drywall, bubble paint, all sorts of different things. So those things just need to be remedied and taken care of. Now, a lot of times you'll see the gutter go straight down to the ground into a pipe, and then it'll come all the way over and it'll come up to one of these things. And this thing is a little pop-up. So as the pipe fills up with water, this middle pops up and it lets out the water. So those are a lot of the times. And just a special note here. So just because you see rock at a negative slope. It doesn't always necessarily mean that the dirt is at a negative grade, right? This one I know because I did. This is a family member's house, and I did this work, and I made sure that it was graded. I dug down, made sure it was graded in a V notch to a perforated drain pipe, and then I made it level. All these terraces level with each other. This one was a little bit different because of the way it worked, and so it looks a little bit negative, but it's not. So looks can be deceiving sometimes, and it's just the one thing you just want to double check. So another area, which this is not like this is an any house really. This type of thing can be kind of dangerous. You want to check to see how often the ducts were cleaned, when they were cleaned, how this is configured, so that way when if you end up closing on the house, that you don't have issues and you don't forget, and it doesn't become a problem down the line. All right, so another point of importance is irrigation systems. If it's in season, make sure to have it tested. There should be a backflow here, which is just a piece that doesn't allow water to come back inside the house that's been from irrigation, which could have bacteria in it and gross stuff in it. But if it was here, you would want to make sure that there's no cracking. The backflows are pretty expensive. It's a $300 to $400 fix. If you miss it and it's out of season, and you can't test it because of the cold, that is one thing to consider, because you'll come next season and be like, well, this is broken, and you have the system, you just got to repair it. So you can catch that during the winter, but you've got to physically check to make sure there's no cracks. Typically the ball valves will crack on the backside, or the backflow will crack on the body somewhere, typically on the backside, sometimes on the side. I know because I used to change them out all the time. And then you can check valve boxes, and see, try to see physical cracks, but it's a little difficult. But you can only do what you can do. So do what you can, and kind of leave the rest to hopefully it's okay. But if it's definitely in season, then I would definitely make sure it's operational, and usually an inspector will turn it on. Any rock faces that a home has, you want to make sure that, like, any of these cracks, divots, anything that's going to go past and through to behind to the sheathing or where the other mesh is sealed. There's grout caulk, there's mortar tubes where you can just fill the cracks with mortar. But if moisture starts to come behind a wall and there's too much of it, it'll actually separate, and the entire wall or majority of the wall will actually come down, and the whole thing will fall off, and you'll have to rebuild it. So something else to keep in mind. One of the last things to look at when you're looking at a house is drainage. Last year, maybe 2 years ago, we had one of those 100-year rains, and probably the most rain we've received in a long time. Probably wasn't 100 years, but it was close. And if a house does not have the correct drainage, it doesn't have enough French drains that are connected to gutters and all those things, and like this area is sloped inward to the middle on both sides, and then it allows that water to flow down and away from the house. Any water you can get away from the house as quickly as possible, the better. We do, even though we don't have those 100-year rains often, in Colorado we do see and have a tendency to have very heavy rains for a short period of time. So I call them gully washers. Other people have other names for them, I'm sure. But those rains are super important, that you're prepared for them and you have the right drainage. Because if you don't, then you're going to see that water come through certain areas that it should not be coming through because it's building up and doesn't have enough outlet to get away from the house or down the diverter or down the channel that is there specifically for drainage. So something else to keep in mind. I hope this helps. I hope you learned something from this, but there are a lot more things to look for, especially inside the house and things. But this is just the main things that I see over and over and over again. When I was doing construction and doing repairs for people, I would see this all the time. And so these types of things can be avoided. They can be postponed based on the maintenance that you're willing to do. It's kind of a yearly thing. I would say most of the time in Colorado, if you can caulk your windows and around your doors, around your trim once a year, you'll be in good shape. If you don't, if it's once every 5 years, once every 8 years, you will have rot and you will have trim that will need to be replaced. And so, you kind of have to just keep up with it as best you can, and that will definitely help postpone it and keep it with a longer life. So, hope you enjoy. Thanks for tuning in. See you in the next one.